Hey guys, I'm the Sega Scourge and welcome back to another Sonic What If. To this day, Sonic Adventure 2 remains one of the most beloved Sonic games of its time, and part of that adoration derives from its first appearance of Shadow the Hedgehog, a character that would grow to infamy in the Sonic fandom. Arguably one of the most memorable and iconic moments in the game was the all-odds-against struggle that Sonic and Shadow made to stop the falling Space Colony Ark from impacting Earth. Using a combined Chaos Control, the two Super Hedgehogs veered the Ark back to orbit, saving the world and those aboard the colony. However, one of them didn't make it. A weakened Shadow fell to Earth following the battle, giving his life to save the world. It was never explained why this happened, but given that Sonic had one of Shadow's inhibitor rings at the game's finale, it's safe to assume that he removed his rings during Chaos Control and expended all of his energy to move the Ark, leaving him exhausted. But the event served as an excellent wrap-up to his redemption arc in SA2. Thus, Shadow died, right? Well, so we thought. Due to his rapid rise in popularity, Shadow later reappeared in Sonic Heroes, where we learned that he'd lost most of his memories. This kicked off an entire subplot that carried over into Shadow the Hedgehog, where the amnesiac Shadow sought to rediscover his identity. Now, one idea that I've seen pop up quite a lot in the comments since I started these what ifs is, what if Sonic lost his memory instead? What if Sonic was the one who died in SA2 rather than Shadow? The more I brainstormed this one, I became increasingly curious on how this would affect Sonic's character. What roads would he take in pursuit of who he is, and how would those with a deeper connection to him be impacted by their friend having no memory of them? So today, let's look into how this interesting little piece of role reversal would play out. To open this discussion, I'm going to start by borrowing a concept from another Sonic tuber. In 2011, Shadow759 made a video on what if Sonic died and Shadow lived, an audio drama which retold the finale of SA2. I'll leave a link to that video in the description. Since it's such an old favorite of mine, I'm going to use it as our starting point and then build this what if from there. With that said, let's begin this what if scenario. After the Biolizard is destroyed, Super Sonic and Super Shadow fly to intercept the Space Colony Ark as it enters Earth's orbit, erupting into a giant fireball. With their combined power, they wrap the Ark in a field of chaos control in the hopes of halting its fall and teleporting it back to its original position. After executing the technique, they find themselves floating inside the field mid-chaos control with white light all around them and the Ark looming overhead. All time around them comes grinding to a near halt. Amidst their confusion, they look up to the Ark and realize that it's still falling at an incredibly slowed pace, but creeping ever closer, giving them just enough time to talk and formulate a plan. Shadow informs Sonic that if he removes his inhibitor rings and combines his full power with the power of the Chaos Emeralds, it might be enough to stop it, but it will cost him his life. Sonic dismisses the idea almost instantly, refusing to let Shadow give up a life that he never had a chance to live. He's sick of Shadow being used for the gain of others by Eggman and even Professor Gerald. It's not fair on him. But Shadow is resolute of his purpose, the role he has to take in saving the people of Earth. He believes that he's the only one with the power to do this. Sonic stands firm, totally rejecting Shadow's decision, telling him that having power and knowing how to use it are two completely different things. Shadow sternly demands Sonic to step aside. He's ordering Sonic to let him forfeit his life. But that's something the Blue Hedgehog just can't do. With a burst of chaos energy from his hand, Sonic blasts the ultimate life form away, asserting that he's far more experienced with the Chaos Emeralds than Shadow is. In the moments he has left, Sonic reflects on his life. He hates the thought of leaving everyone, but he wants to give Shadow his life back and hopes they'll understand. With a whisper in the void, Sonic says that he's counting on Shadow to look after his friends. Sayonara, Shadow the Hedgehog. With all his might, Sonic unleashes Chaos Control once again, and in a flash, the Ark is slingshotted back to where it began. The residual shockwave of the Ark's reappearance sends Sonic and Shadow spiraling backwards, but with nothing left to give, and his ring energy dwindling, Sonic is swept up by the Earth's pull. and falls to the planet below in his super form. Once Shadow regains his bearings, it's already too late. Shadow recalls Maria's words, "Give them a chance to be happy," wondering if Sonic has managed to finally fulfill her wish. He laments on the two of them, how both their deaths were so he could live. Hovering above the earth, Super Shadow clenches his fist and passionately vows to not only live his life, but to fill the huge shoes left behind by Sonic, doing what he can to fight for peace. Back on board the Space Colony Ark, the door to the observation deck opens and Sonic's friends turn to see Shadow, stood alone. Tails and Amy ask where Sonic is, and with a heavy heart, Shadow closes his eyes and shakes his head, confirming their worst fears. Amy collapses to her knees and breaks down into a torrent of tears. Tails does what he can to comfort her as the reality of their loss seeps into his expression. They already thought they lost Sonic once today, but this time he's really gone. Shadow steps towards Tails and Amy. He says he's sorry and asks for their forgiveness, trying to offer some words in memorial of the Blue Hedgehog. But just then, an enraged voice cuts through the stilled morning. "Shut up! You think you have the right to talk about him?" Knuckles the Echidna flies across the room and punches Shadow square in the face, sending him slamming into one of the reinforced windows, cracking it. "It should have been you, not him! None of this would have happened if you weren't around!" Shadow stays down, with his eyes closed. Deep down, he knows Knuckles is right, so he says nothing, realizing that the blow he received is nothing compared to the blow they've been dealt. He knows the pain of losing someone all too well. "And you!" Knuckles turns his anger towards Dr. Eggman, who stumbles backwards, cowering. Knuckles' outbursts only make Amy bawl her eyes out even more as Tails shouts for him to stop it. Knuckles backs off, and the trio of Sonic's friends grieve in silence. Rouge approaches Shadow, helping him to his feet. Eggman sees an opening to slip away quietly, fleeing the scene before any of them notice, infuriating Shadow once he realizes. As the group exit the room and prepare to leave the Ark, Rouge asks Shadow what he's going to do from this point onward. He says that he's going to find Eggman and make him answer for his crimes. He's going to fight for justice, just like Sonic would. The story of SA2 comes to a close, and in the time following the incident on the Ark, Knuckles returns to Angel Island with the Master Emerald. Tails and Amy search high and low for any sign of Sonic, turning bleak when their survey turns up nothing. Anyway, as per the events of Sonic Heroes, Rouge inevitably comes snooping around and finds Eggman's secret treasure, hidden away in an underground base inside a dark chamber. She haphazardly opens a sealed container full of green fluid, revealing Sonic the Hedgehog inside. Sonic did indeed survive his fall to Earth, just barely. His super form shielded him from burning up on re-entry, and lasted just long enough for Sonic to impact the planet's surface, leaving a large crater. He lived, sure, but a crash like that is bound to be painful, even in super form. An unconscious and badly damaged Sonic was discovered by one of Dr. Eggman's robots and brought back to the nefarious scientist for examination, eventually being sealed inside the pod, and no one would ever know. I'm sure right now a lot of you are saying, why on earth would Eggman keep Sonic alive and not just finish the job while he has the chance? Well, to bring up Sonic Forces again, Eggman had ample opportunity to kill Sonic in that game, but instead, he just imprisoned him on the Death Egg for 6 months. He doesn't just want to off Sonic in his sleep, he wants to prove that he's better than him. He wants to completely and utterly defeat him. Only then would it be a true victory. Plus, he wouldn't pass up on the chance for some interesting research now that he has the blue rodent captured. So, he's kept him locked up for study ever since. Once Sonic is set free by Rouge, the skirmish with E123 Omega takes place as usual, and Rouge breaks up the fight. It's then that she realizes the actuality of Sonic's resurrection. Just like Shadow in the original story, Sonic can't remember anything. He's completely lost all memory of who he is. The only things he can remember is his name and his title, the fastest thing alive. This Sonic is a lot more calm and subdued compared to his usual self, but he has an exaggerated way of moving that makes him seem unusually focused. Rouge finds it uncomfortable to make eye contact with him, not because he seems threatening, just because his gaze is so intense. even though the same occasional guileless smirk would pop up. Rouge didn't get to know Sonic all that well in SA2, but nonetheless, she partners up with him and Omega to form a company. Sonic is now a member of Team Dark. Together, they set out to find Dr. Eggman to get some answers for Sonic, revenge for Omega, and Rouge to get the loot she's looking for. Meanwhile, Amy Rose discovers an image of what looks like Sonic in a local newspaper. When she sees the photo, she covers her mouth, with tears filling up her eyes. She'd never given up hope. All this time she'd been using her tarot cards in hopes of finding him, and now he might come back to her. She can barely contain herself with the possibility that Sonic is alive and out there somewhere. But the perplexing thing is why the spiny hedgehog in the image seems to be holding the missing Choco, LeChow, and Froggy. Amy gathers up her friends Cream the Rabbit and Big the Cat and sets out to find the missing hero. Around the same time elsewhere, Tails is caught up in the pressing concern of the letter he's just received from Dr. Eggman, announcing that he will conquer the world in 3 days. With Knuckles at his side, ready for action, Tails explains that they're going to need help to stop the Doctor's latest scheme. They're going to need Shadow. Upon meeting Tails and Knuckles and learning of the potential severity of the situation, Shadow allies himself with the duo to form Team Hero. Their team-up is more of a working relationship rather than sunshine and rainbows. Knuckles is still incredibly bitter towards Shadow, constantly mocking him and taking digs at every opportunity, but Shadow just brushes the remarks off. Tails treats the Union more amicably, remaining polite and sociable with Shadow, seeing the Dark Hedgehog's desire to do good, truly. And the Chaotix are out there too, but they don't really offer anything to this what-if story at the moment. Upon meeting Dr. Eggman, Sonic tries to question the Doctor about who he truly is. He's met with a vague and dismissive response, bringing him no closer to uncovering the truth. In that moment, however, Sonic feels a faint yet sharp pain course through his brain. In a haze, he catches glimpses of countless entanglements with the mad scientist. Unwittingly seeing all of the fights he's had with Eggman in the past, he stubbornly shakes off the event and continues on. The story proceeds as normal right up until Lost Jungle, where Team Dark, now with added Sonic, come into contact with Shadow, Tails, and Knuckles. The 3 of them can't believe what they're seeing. Knuckles literally can't believe it and thinks he's seeing a ghost. It's Sonic, with all the overwhelming presence that usually accompanies him. But something is off. Something is just different about him. When the scuffle inevitably breaks out, more so to do with Rouge and Omega's antagonism, Tails and Knuckles are forced to defend themselves against the onslaught of their former friend. Amidst the pandemonium, Tails can barely get a word out to Sonic, as Shadow does what he can to protect him and Knuckles. While locked in combat with the Black Blur, Sonic notices the striking similarity between Shadow's speed and his own, causing some words to be exchanged between the hedgehogs. Huh, so there's more to you than just looking like me. What are you anyway? What? You mean you don't remember? Just then, Sonic's skull feels like it's been split in 2 and he collapses onto the ground. Shadow backs off as Sonic begins seeing flashes of his prior battles with Shadow in SA2, as well as his fights against Knuckles in the past, eventually retreating with Rouge and Omega into the forest when the lucid visions become too severe. Team Hero are left devastated, wondering why Sonic attacked them, why he's in league with an old enemy and an Eggman robot. Shadow stays quiet, unsure how to break the news to Tails and Knuckles. Meanwhile, Sonic is left confused and disturbed, questioning if those 3 were perhaps old enemies of his. Rouge cautiously asks him if he's okay, but he shrugs it off and presses onward. Sonic continues to question anything and everything around him, all the way up to their final closing destination, the Final Fortress, flagship of the Egg Fleet. There, Dr. Eggman and his Egg Emperor are defeated. Team Hero take out the fleet, and Team Rose find the missing Froggy and Chocola. In a nearby cargo hold, Rouge enters, still searching for the grand prize to take home. To her horror, inside she discovers row after row of duplicate Sonics, each inside their own containment pods. In this story, the Shadow androids weren't created. Instead, Eggman used his research of the sleeping Sonic to construct an army of biomechanical doppelgangers, the Sonic androids. Omega enters, prepping to level the entire facility, and Rouge exits to join Sonic outside. At the same time, Team Chaotix have just discovered the real Dr. Eggman sealed inside a chamber elsewhere aboard the ship. Dark clouds envelop the skies around the final fortress as a shadowy figure is spotted high above, laughing in a deep, maniacal robotic voice. The four teams, plus Eggman, assemble to face the true mastermind, Neo Metal Sonic. This marks the first time Amy has seen Sonic in this retold hero story. Just as the tower explodes from a lightning bolt and Metal begins his transformation into Metal Overlord, Amy dives onto Sonic, wrapping her arms around him tightly and burying her face into his back. She sobs wildly, paying no attention to the frightening events unfolding around her. Suddenly, Sonic turns and pushes the weeping Rose to the ground. Back off! Amy is understandably shaken. She's grieved and looked for him all this time, and the first thing he did when reunited with her is knock her away. Staring into her eyes, there's neither recognition nor unrecognition from Sonic, just an irritated, disconnected face looking back at her. No quirky remark, no usual debonair, just a vacant stare. He gives Amy no more than a passing glance as his attention returns to the scene in front of him. The events of Sonic Heroes' last story play out as per usual. The only difference this time is that Sonic does not step in to turn super against Metal. He's actually forgotten how to do that. Instead, Shadow takes charge, powering up with the Chaos Emeralds and transforming into Super Shadow, and the leftover energy washing over Tails and Knuckles, giving them the Super Shields. Upon seeing Super Shadow, Sonic is yet again wrought with pain, this time worse than before. In the vision, he sees himself in the same golden form he's just witnessed. He sees himself floating in space adjacent to Super Shadow before falling down to the planet below. With that, he's pulled back into reality, quietly gasping for breaths. The Metal Overlord is ultimately defeated by the supercharged Team Hero, reverting back to the regular Metal Sonic and collapsing. As the clouds part and the sky returns to its natural blue color, Sonic stares over to Metal, contemplating why this robot bears such a striking resemblance to him. He's cut short, however, as Team Hero turn and approach him. He instinctively takes a defensive stance before Rouge places her hand onto his shoulder as if to tell him it's alright. Shadow, Tails, and Knuckles stand in a line bordering Sonic. Amy then walks up next to them, and each of their looks give off a sort of tense melancholy. Sonic feels exposed, like a raw nerve, with some sweat drops running down his head. The two-tailed fox then steps forward. Tails nervously looks up into Sonic's eyes, optimistically awaiting some kind of explanation for the way he's been acting. Sonic meets his gaze as the same stinging pain from before slowly builds inside of his head like a rising thunder. The blue hedgehog swirls with emotions, unable to move, feeling as if he's being held in place. No, wait a minute, that's not a feeling. He's really being held in place. He looks down to see his body covered in a cyan glow. The group look on in bewilderment before Sonic is picked up by the disembodied force and violently flung away from them. All of a sudden, a voice calls out from behind Shadow and the others. "All of you, get away from that monster!" It's Silver the Hedgehog. And that's where we're going to leave this story for right now. So what do you guys think? How do you feel about Sonic losing his memory instead of Shadow and the impact this has had on the two characters? Do you feel that these events are possibly leading Sonic astray from his friends? And what are your guesses as to why Silver has suddenly shown up far earlier in the story than he's supposed to? Please share your thoughts with me in the comments below. I've been the Sega Scourge, and I'll see you guys in the next Sonic What If. Take care.